Hey, good morning, everybody. Dave Walker here on a bright early morning in Chicago with my friend Matt Zerby, who is the owner and runs Wasco Nursery in the town right next to mine. Matt, good morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for getting up early to do this. So I've asked you to, come and tell us a little bit about your journey personally and in your business in 2020, and then we'll talk a little bit about going forward in 2021. So can you just tell me where you were and what you were thinking when you realized back in, I guess it was March of last year for you that, wow, this is going to impact my business in a big way, this pandemic.
Sure. Yeah, actually, I think for me, it the sort of the thought of how it was going to impact my business actually hit me on a train ride in late February. I actually had taken my team on a little team building thing. We were going to the Garfield Conservatory in
Okay.
Chicago, and we had it was right towards the very end of February, and so a lot of the global talk of COVID was happening. I think at that point, if I'm not mistaken, like New York was starting to explode with COVID cases, and it was like, boy, this is getting real. It was in Asia, now it's here, now it's more real. When it's on the other side of the globe, it's like, okay, yeah, I see it over there, but once it starts getting close to home, then it starts, really you start thinking like, how is this going to impact my business? Over the next couple of weeks or next 2 weeks, I would say, really started to look at, as we were starting to see businesses and states and different things shutting down, I started realizing that that was a very real possibility for us, that we
Mhm.
were looking at a shutdown. And really, that's when I would say sort of panic mode set in, because my business, I know you're familiar with my business, but for those of you that aren't as familiar, we're a seasonal business. We're open year round. We have revenue year round, but we get about 50 to 60% of our annual revenue comes in the 6 week time period.
Mhm.
Really heavily loaded in the spring season, and our business model really doesn't work very well if spring doesn't happen. We've had cold, wet springs. We've had hot, dry springs. We've had all sorts of weather issues that have affected us, and unfortunately, for lack of a better term, you weather those as they
Mhm.
go along. But we've never been closed for a period of time in the spring, and that's what we were facing last year. So we were shut down for a couple of weeks, and then we were getting mixed guidance from our state, unfortunately, as to whether our business was considered essential.
Mhm.
And we were sort of walking this line of, are we essential, are we not? is it is it the right thing to do to stay open, if we are able to stay open, or is it the right thing to do to stay closed? So it was there were a few weeks anyway of kind of doing some serious soul searching, some investigating, as far as what is permitted and what is not, and what should we be doing as a business, as an organization that has, we at peak season have around 70, 75 employees. So there's a lot of people, a lot of families relying on us, and so what does that look like for them as well? It was kind of a really a crazy time.
Yeah, and from the outside looking in, you managed it really, really well. I'm sure
Thank
it
you.
didn't feel like it in the moment. It probably felt like you were flying by the seat of your pants.
There
But
were more than a few moments that I felt that way.
but the you had to your people need to understand you're actually a retailer, that you are a retail location that has requires physical traffic to do business. And um I remember talking to you early on that you were classified as a retailer and you needed to be closed, but the big box guys like Home Depot and Lowe's, which have garden centers, were allowed to be open because they were considered essential. So I know what did you do to lobby on your own behalf to say, hey, everybody, we are, if you're going to give it to those guys, please give it to us, because for those of us who are fanatic gardeners, we certainly thought you were essential. We certainly
Yeah,
wanted you to be open so we could get our stuff because we were stuck
sure,
at home. The only thing to
sure.
do was to dig in the dirt. So what did you
Yeah.
have to do to kind of lobby on your own behalf?
Well, a couple of things. We actually did some real lobbying with our state legislators. I reached out to every one of them. Had more than a handful of phone calls with our state representatives, with our state senators, with some other organizations that are in our state that are in the in our green industry. Uh,
Hmm.
and so we all kind of pooled together, and then we got our two trade associations. One is a landscape aside of the kind of a landscape association, and the other one is a nursery and garden center association. And so we got them together, and then started all of us kind of a concerted effort to lobby on our behalf. And you're right, we were in that kind of in between thing where, as a landscape side, the landscape side of our business, we were technically allowed to stay open. The retail side of the business, which, as you mentioned, relies on foot traffic and people coming in. That was the side where we were getting some mixed guidance as to whether we could stay open or not, because part of the guidance that we were receiving said that, well, if you supply landscape companies, if you're a landscape supplier, you can stay open, which we were, but not all of our products are for that. So, can we sell a tree to a landscaper in the area, or to a person? You working in your own yard technically are considered a landscaper, no different than anyone else. So
Hmm.
if I can sell a tree to you, can I sell a hummingbird feeder? Can I sell a basket of flowers? Like, where do you draw the line, and how does
Right.
that work? And that's where getting the legislators involved uh, really helped. Looking at that, so we were closed for 10 days or 2 weeks in March. We were kind of half open, half closed during the first part of April. We were able to be open for delivery and curbside pickup, which delivery is always something that we've offered, but curbside pickup, in our world, that never existed. Then we had to pivot very quickly and try to figure out, how do we make a curbside pickup model work? How do we take an 8-acre retail garden center and allow people to shop it somehow virtually and things like that, whether it be online or via a Zoom call or a Skype call, or
Hmm.
time, like, let me show you the tree that, Dave, do you want this tree? How about this one? Things like that, doing some
Literally
concierge
down to
shop.
that, right?
Yeah,
Walking around the yard with a phone going, yeah, this is the one. Uh,
right, exactly.
Crazy.
So, it really was, it was kind of a unique time for sure. But our legislators helped a ton. I remember getting a phone call from our state senator on my cell phone on Easter Sunday, and he's like, "Hey, you got a couple minutes to talk, because this is where we're at. This is what we need to do." And
Mhm.
I took that call, and you
Right.
know we eventually, fortunately, got our governor to agree by the end of April to allow retail garden centers, which are predominantly outdoor businesses,
Hmm.
to open back up fully, or following CDC guidelines, et cetera. Anyway, but so at the very end of April, Governor Pritzker announced that garden centers could remain fully open as of May 1st, basically.
So then comes the moment of be careful what you ask for, because now you have to physically open.
Right.
And tell me a little bit about what went into the logistical planning and execution of really turning this outdoor retail center into something that was, quote, CDC guideline safe.
Yeah. So that what for sure was our probably our biggest challenge. We have a very large footprint. We're on 100 acres. The garden center itself is about 8 acres, and the remaining is growing fields and et cetera. But the store itself has a fairly small footprint, and in the past has always been a bit of a bottleneck for us during our busy season. That's always been a bit of an issue, and we had some temporary registers that we would set up outside during the busy season so we could try to move people in and out as fast as possible. But now we were looking at the prospect of in our tiny little store, the checkout itself. How are we going to take all of that outdoors and keep it, do it well, do it safe? And so then, we just started looking. Well, we're going to need outdoor registers, and so we literally I ordered a couple of large rolling countertops.
Mhm.
We could transform into mobile point of sale stations, and we could wheel those outside every day. And then it was, well, how do we make this reliable and not rely on our Wi-Fi, which can be spotty at times for processing credit cards and things like that. So, how do we get this hardwired, and how do we keep it weather safe, and what do we do when it rains, and how do we handle things when when it's cold? And so you just start kind of walking through each of
Right.
those different steps and say, okay, CDC is saying that we should stay 6 feet apart. Well, then maybe we shouldn't be accepting cash right now if that requires a hand-to-hand transaction.
Got it.
So let's go with credit cards only, which
Mhm.
is unfortunate because we pay obviously a transaction fee on every one of those. And
Mhm.
we like to take cash because obviously there's no aside from handling it, there's no expense there. But we moved our credit card terminals 6 feet away from the register, kind of had a little station set up.
Mhm.
So the customers, when they were checking out, were 6 feet away using their credit card, and we had hand sanitizer stations, and we had lines painted on our brick patio to signify where people can stand and how to social distance and all of that kind of thing. And it actually turned out that we were far more effective in moving people, through our queue. Last year during the pandemic, when we had everything was new and different, but we were far more effective at moving people through the lines than we were in past years. And
That's interesting. That's
actually,
interesting.
one of the neat things that sort of came about from COVID, one of the things you learn in a crisis, it's like, oh, well, hey, we're actually doing a better job at this. This isn't like well, we'll make it work, but I can't wait to go back to the other way.
Mhm.
Actually, we were looking at it, said, we're moving people through here faster, and our staff is doing a great job here. So let's try to make this a more permanent solution. And so we actually did, towards the end of the year, temporary tents and folding tables and things like that became permanent, like pavilion type structures that could be that were permanently weatherproof and weren't going to leak because of the rain or blow around in the wind, and kind of made it a more permanent setup, which really has worked out quite well for us.
If you don't mind sharing, so you were able to open up, as I recall, right around, I don't know, it was the first week of May that you were able to fully
Yeah,
reopen?
yeah, pretty much. We sort of we were fully open in late April, based on some of the guidance that we were getting, that because we were both provided to landscapers as well, the retail, even though the retail public is for sure the lion's share of our business and our customer base.
And did you take a significant hit because of the time where you were fundamentally not open, or at least a big section of the business, or did it flow back in as your doors opened?
It flowed back in as the doors opened. In fact, the interestingly enough, the first couple of weeks when we were fully closed, or when our store was closed down, um, I just I had my laptop and I was uh, taking orders.
Mhm.
We're calling in, emailing, saying, "Hey, when you're open back up, I want this or that," and even wanting to get mulch and compost and different things delivered, and so I
Guilty. I was one of
turned a
those.
truck into. Yeah, exactly. I turned a truck into a mobile delivery office, and was taking orders and delivering, and it was kind of wild because our March numbers, based on some a lot of mulch and compost and other sales and some things like that. Our March numbers actually ended up being a little bit better than the previous year. And then April, when like I said, when we got towards the end of the month and we're able to kind of realize that we could open, it was a wild ride. Our customer traffic shot through the roof at that point because most retail was closed. A lot of other businesses were closed. People were working from home and had a little more time on their hand, and we were getting a lot of people telling us we're just happy to be outside, and so they felt safe in our store.
Things.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and so it was kind of a neat thing. I had people saying, hey, your checkout setup is the best I've seen anywhere, in terms of separation and that type of thing. So people felt safe with our procedures, and they felt safe being outside. And so then all of a sudden, all of these, fears and anxieties and stuff started, eroding as people are shopping. And then a wild thing started happening, which is I started getting customers from 1 hour, 2 hours away from our area that were coming into shop saying, hey, I've heard about you. I've always wanted to come down here and shop at your store, but I never had the time to make the hour and 30-minute drive or the 2-hour drive.
Wow, interesting.
Now I have all the time in the world. And so we had people coming in from, honestly, from, very great distances who were there to shop the store because they wanted to see what we had and were happy with what they found. And, so then that kind of opened up this whole new customer base to us that we weren't even really familiar with.
That's fascinating. So fast forward now, here we are, almost 1 year, maybe a little more than 1 year since you were able to reopen. Lessons learned, number one, and number two, how do you feel about the future?
Sure. Lessons learned. I would say that the one I mentioned already, just that that our store was a bit of the bottleneck, for our customer traffic flow. So the foot traffic and traffic flow are a lot more important than I ever realized. And I know that normal brick and mortar retail stores have traffic plans, and there's people that's what they do for a living. They're laying out stores, and I mean there's science that goes into that. Being an outdoor retail garden center with this massive footprint, it's always like, well, people can go wherever they want. It's a big, they can, but we realized a lot, with trying to keep people, coming in a certain area and going out a certain area so that we don't have the people passing each other, and trying to keep the social distancing aspect of, we really started focusing both from the safety aspect as well as from an efficiency standpoint. How do people throughout the garden center, throughout our store, all of those types of things. So that was probably one of the biggest lessons learned, for sure. And then I think another lesson learned is that, although we may not be, quote unquote, essential to life, like maybe a pharmacy or a grocery store, for a lot of people, we were absolutely an essential business, essential for their mental health, essential for their well-being. Of course, you can make an argument that, trees and shrubs and all of those things that are, filtering out pollutants and providing shade for our homes, and all of those things are essential and necessary. But it was really neat to see the way that people were, I guess, kind of getting back in touch with their their love of the outdoors, love of gardening, all of that kind of stuff. And took a break from the electronics, and people started realizing, like, that the electronics and all of that kind of stuff maybe weren't quite all they were cracked up to be. So
that's terrific. So it really, I mean, it in some ways invigorated the brand, invigorated your brand, and invigorated demand, and you were able to respond to it. So casting your eyes forward, in 2021, you're probably in the midst of what feels like back to normal or back to where you were, or is business better? Are the things that you've learned and the customers that you've attracted 1 year from when you reopened, does it feel better? Are you bullish on the future?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, the our business last year absolutely flourished. It was by the time the season was over, we had just broken every sales record that we had ever had
Hmm.
uh, last year, and so it turns out that that a global pandemic is good for our industry. Certainly wish that on anybody. We're not, I'm
Right.
not that, of course, but people staying home, people traveling less, people investing more in their homes and their well-being and their peace of mind. That was a boon for our business. Um, so that was pretty neat. The interesting thing though is, as an industry, I've heard various reports from a couple different universities and a couple other studies, but somewhere between 10 and 20 million new customers were added to our industry in the US last year.
No
So
kidding.
yeah, I mean that is a mind-blowing number. So these are
Wow.
be, when they're in these the studies that I've read, that could be a person buying 2 tomatoes to grow on their patio. That could be
Mhm.
someone spending thousands of dollars on a landscape project that they never would have done. I mean, it could be any number of things, but somewhere between 10 and 20 million new customers to our industry. So that's that's advertising you can't buy.
Right, right.
It's an amazing thing. So that carried us through the year, through the season last year, and I think certainly looking at the way things have started off for us this year,
Hmm.
uh, that's carrying over into 2021. Um, Now we have a whole new set of problems on our hands, which is we can't make new plants really quickly. You know,
Right.
anybody who has ever grown something knows that it takes some time
Yeah.
to grow, and some crops have a quicker turn time than others. So, on the side of things like our trees, that could be a 3 to 7 year turnaround time, to
Right.
get things up to size. Other plants might be 6 months to a year, 1 to 2 years, whatever the case may be. But because our sales numbers were so good last year, just locally, but also as an industry, um, there were a lot of plants purchased,
Hmm.
and the demand has remained really high, and the supply is really, really low.
Right.
Uh, so we're seeing a lot of shortages in plant
Hmm.
material in the industry. And although we sell some other things, plant material is our number one,
Right.
number
Right.
one category. So now it's all about looking towards the future and trying to figure out, okay, we can make some substitutions. If you don't have this particular plant, is there something that's similar? And
Right. Right.
any different than the grocery store? And if you don't have this brand of soup, can you get that brand of soup? Is there something that's comparable? That type of thing.
Mhm.
Yes, maybe you have some customers who are really in love with this brand of soup, and they're not going to be as happy with that other brand, but most people will. And so we start looking at alternatives to the to our normal inventory. Start looking outside for maybe other vendors that
Mhm.
we hadn't been working with as much, to try to make sure that we have the right amount of inventory that we want. And then another thing that I did personally, or in our business, is I looked, kind of saw the writing on the wall that there were going to be some serious plant shortages here in the near future. And so in our own nursery, as I mentioned, we have a nursery growing ground as well.
Mhm.
I actually harvested a lot less of our own material this spring than I normally would have, so that I can leave that in the ground and have it available to me this fall, next spring, next fall.
Interesting.
Looked at purchasing in from some other vendors,
Mhm.
right now, while it's available, I can buy buy this material from other vendors.
Right.
In the fall or next year, those people are going to be out of that inventory,
Hmm.
and I will have it in my field. So I kind of have this backup plan of, having it at least 100 acres of growing grounds with plant material in there that I can harvest this fall and next fall, and so hopefully that sets us. I mean, there's going to be some lapses in inventory for sure.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
that sets us up well for the future, and kind of a nice, a nice fallback plan that maybe a lot of other folks in my situation won't necessarily have.
Well, listen, I'm sure everybody in this audience wishes you the best of luck. What a great story, Matt. Thank you so much for sharing, because it really took us on your journey. And I think that the way in which you address the challenge in your particular business is admirable, draws a lot of respect. And I think that good for you that, notwithstanding, I'm sure those early days were grab your head in your hands and just pray that you really have come out the other side of it. So best of luck to you, man. And thanks very much for doing this.
Oh, you're welcome. It was my pleasure. Thank you again for having me.